Morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Living Together Committee meeting. I'll ask Councillor Ranghoho to open with a karakia.
Nā tātai. Nono re hukurori e mangarum kiri me te whenua whakaropai ki nā tānata katoa, āmini. E whakamoni te atua na mātou ki a koe i hua mai mana kutara. I te ni mātou e koe ina rā kua pauri ati nei taune mai ki tēnei rā. Ki te kauhia mai nā kuru ai aroha i runga i a tātou ki te tutu ki pai nā mahi kei mua tātou aroaro. Kurori ki tau i mā tapu, āmini.
Amen. Today, Whakatane District Council goes live with the live streaming of council and standing committee meetings held in the Tocha room while within the council building. The website will live stream directly to council's YouTube channel in real time. The purpose of streaming meetings live is to provide greater access to council debate and decision making and to encourage transparency. To those members of the public here today, all care will be taken to maintain your privacy. However, as a visitor in the public gallery, your presence could be recorded. By remaining in the public gallery, it is understood that your consent has been given and if your image is inadvertently broadcast. Microphones are sensitive to noise, so please remain silent unless asked to speak. In case of an emergency, please follow the building wardens or make your way to the nearest exit. The meeting point is located at Peace Park across the road. Bathroom facilities are situated to the left near the Chambers foyer entranceway. Please also be advised that the Finance and Performance Committee will follow the Living Together Committee today, but not before 1 p.m. And I also note an agenda typo that today's Living Together Committee, today is Thursday, not Friday. Do we have any apologies? No apologies? Any acknowledgements, tributes? Okay. Conflicts of interest. Do members have any conflicts of interest to declare?
No. I should mention, Mr. Chair, that I'm a trustee of the Kaitiaki Trust, which will be talking about some business that the trust has interest in.
Thank you. Noted. Public forum. We've got a deputation here today for Te Whara Ora National Public Health Service, so I invite Elliot Fenton and Greg Evans to come forward, and Greg's going to speak.
My name's Greg Evans. I'm one of the medical officers at Te Whara Public Health. I've also got my colleague here, Elliot. To introduce him.
Kia ora koutou, ko Elliot Fenton tuku ingoa. I work in the Health and All Policies team at Te Whara.
We'd just like to thank you for the opportunity to come and talk to you today about your regarding the professional your local alcohol policy. As I mentioned, I'm one of the medical officers of health with Te Whara, which is a statutory appointed role. My role or responsibility is to promote health within the region, in particular focus on equity for populations. And I think we can all agree that there's significant harm to both individuals and the health of the population and social harm as a result of alcohol. And I think that the LAP is a strong tool that can help us recognise the object of the Sale and Supply of Alcohol Act, in particular minimising harm to vulnerable groups. So we previously submitted last year as Toi Te Ora. I'm not sure if you're aware, but we're undergoing a lot of reform at the moment as part of, and we're now part of the National Public Health Service, which is the operational sort of doing arm of Health New Zealand. And as I've mentioned, I think we're all aware of the harm that alcohol does. It's New Zealand's most harmful drug, and we have to acknowledge that alcohol is a significant cause of acute injury, lots of diseases, including more and more research about cancer as a cause of cancer, disability and social harm. It affects our communities, our whānau and those who are most vulnerable. And Toitūra's consistent stance over the last 10 years or so through our work with TLAs has been to advocate and support the use of population-based strategies to try and modify the behaviour of individuals, yes, but also modify and change the environments in which individuals are able or not able to make decisions. So I guess we were delighted to see a strengthened LAP that embodies a sentiment of the community that's been reached out to as well, and aims to reduce hazardous drinking and alcohol-related and social harm by reducing the availability and access to alcohol, whilst balancing the needs of responsible consumers. And further strengthening of the LAP provides a significant opportunity for Council to improve the local environment and the culture around the drinking of alcohol. We'd like to commend Eastern Bay of Plenty Council on the actions of the provisional LAP that was presented. In particular, the focus on the reduction of off-licence hours. As we discussed in our original submission, research shows that reducing the total hours at which alcohol is available and accessible contributes to the reduction of alcohol-related harm in the community in a number of ways. However, we would like to advocate for continued efforts to reduce outlet density, so in other words, a number of outlets that are in particular less well-off areas, particularly deprivation 9 and 10 areas. We know that the Council must look to achieve the object of the Sale and Supply of Alcohol Act to reduce and minimise excess consumption and related harm, and this is why we agree that reducing hours for those off licences is well within Council's purview. We also agree with Council regarding supermarkets being equally included with other off-licence premises regarding off-licence trading hours, as it is not just a reduction in the access to alcohol, but is also a way of reducing exposure of children to alcohol and the normalisation of purchasing alcohol before 9 o'clock in the morning. And I guess just finally, we know that towns within Eastern Bay of Plenty are an extremely diverse group. Protecting the community and those most vulnerable is the purpose here. There are also challenges this community face, such as those who are living in rural communities and with being able to access health and emergency services for alcohol-related harm. So in summary, we are in support of efforts that reduce excess availability to alcohol and those efforts to change our culture around alcohol.
Thanks very much, Greg. I'll ask for questions of clarification. Councillor Oles.
Thank you, Chair. Greg, thank you for that presentation. Living in a rural community, I certainly understand the concerns you've raised. As a council, or as a sub-region even, is there more we can do?
Yeah, thank you for raising that question. I guess our overall aim is to try and reduce availability and access to alcohol, so that we're shifting that we have around alcohol, which denormalises excessive consumption, makes it less appealing. Well, makes it more difficult to access alcohol, thereby reducing problems with addiction and ongoing alcohol consumption. So the LAP is strong in that it's trying to reduce availability and access by reducing those hours. One of the other things that we could look at would be actually trying to seek or have some aspirational goals about when we have new outlets coming in, where they're placed, and sort of capping them to reduce, further reduce access and availability, particularly in vulnerable populations.
Thank you.
Councillor Puller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess mine's not a question, really, rather a statement, if I may, but I don't agree. And I was on the panel for the thing, and I don't agree with reducing hours either. It's the wrong way to go. It's the evidence at the bottom of the cliff stuff, really. I think there's areas that we need to focus on that we'll achieve a better result rather than just shutting stuff down. But you still get access.
Councillor Dennis, can we just keep questions of clarification, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, gentlemen, for your presentation. My question is that over New Zealand over the last couple of years, there's been a number of councils that have tried to adjust through their alcohol policy, the opening hours of supermarkets, etc. And we hear of some councils that have given up and not gone to the appeal court, others that have challenged the appeal and won. What is the average thing throughout New Zealand now? Are councils able to put this in with the court's backing, or are they getting hammered by the suppliers?
It's always the risk of getting appealed or taken to court by, say, like those people or large corporations. But with their ruling in the Supreme High Court with the Auckland case, the court ruled in their favour that council is within their rights to adjust the hours to which they feel fit, and that falls under the purpose of the Act, which the court ruled, which is around, the purpose of the Act is about the whole of the community. And so it's about protecting the whole of the community through the object, so the way of minimising alcohol-related harm and excess consumption. So council is effectively within their rights to dictate which hours off licences, non-licences are open. It's the default hours, which is 7 a.m. till 11 p.m, but those are much as just default hours. They do not mean that that is the requirement, and it doesn't mean that that has to be abided by the council. It is completely up to the council's choice.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Oman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, gentlemen. And firstly, thank you for all that you do for our community. My question follows on from Councillor Dennis in that you mentioned the Auckland example. Are there other, like, more rural and provincial councils that you know of who have adjusted the hours of accessibility only to find that themselves have been contested with it? And have they been successful?
So far, Auckland was the one that led it. Since then, we have interacted with another council regarding changing the hours outside of that, but not that I'm aware of in terms of those decisions being finalised and implemented. However, it is being discussed, and it is coming to the attention of councils that more needs to be done in terms of addressing the culture, so denormalising the way that we as a whole country in Aotearoa think about alcohol and consume alcohol, but also thinking about the actions that councils can take, the ability to lead and be courageous in the decision makings to effectively address alcohol related harm. As Greg mentioned, it's New Zealand's most dangerous drug, and it's easily accessible and available.
Would you say this would be, in light of your question, a progressive move to take the stance?
Yeah.
So a leading the way.
And probably, I know there's a lot of influence, nationwide with some of the larger companies that are wanting to keep the existing default hours. So I'd be really interested to see, if our Eastern Bay decided to stick with the ones that we had in our local alcohol policy draft, if that would have a nice flow-on effect for the rest of the country.
I think it is a ripple effect, and as Greg said, it's very courageous and progressive, but it's about someone taking action. To be like, we have communities, we have members of our community that are suffering, that are vulnerable, and there's always the argument that it will not take away people's rights and freedoms or their entitlements, but it's understanding that the responsible consumer will find ways around and be able to access which suits their lifestyle, but it's protecting those that don't have a choice, that their choice is actually impacted by the say addiction or the social situation that they find themselves in due to a system.
Victor?
A couple. One on data. Is the data clearly showing a reduction in total use of alcohol per head and harmful use? And are we doing enough in the education stakes? Do we have programs at school to emphasise harmful effects of alcohol? Because, you've got to work on the young people.
I think first to address the education question, that's not our purview. We aren't the Ministry of Education, unfortunately. And I think that is a great point, though, in terms of the education is a fundamental part to understanding how alcohol influences and impacts the health, not only of the individual, but those within their immediate vicinity.
I thought you might be aware whether there were programs, but you're not aware.
Yeah, unsure. That's not exactly our area. To say. In terms of data and research, there is a lot of systematic and a lot of research that focuses around the reduction of access and availability and the associated related harm.
I was just wondering if anything we've done so far is actually resulting in a decrease in total use per capita and harmful use. Has anything we've done had an impact?
As in the district specifically, or as the country?
As in all measures whatever measures we've taken. We're not sure. Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
And I think I think you're raising a good point though. Is I think I would strongly advocate for more intelligence around and gathering more data. One of our colleagues who couldn't be here today, who's now joined part of the intelligence team within this new structure that we've become part of the National Public Health Service, is seeking to set up ways of gathering better data, particularly around emergency department data, because we don't really have good access to emergency department data, and that would reflect sort of more, give us a better, more accurate view of actually who shows up to hospital. Because we have data on who's admitted to hospital, but we don't really have good data on who shows up to hospital, and also allow for more accurate description of what they're turning up to hospital with.
The corollary to my question is that if you're applauding a policy being implemented, but if you don't have good data at the beginning, then you won't be able to track whether or not your policy had an influence. That's where I'm going. But anyway, thank you.
Councillor Boynton?
Thank you for your presentation today. I suppose I'm just wanting to ask, is the legislation that changed last year to allow more strength to local communities around decisions for supply of alcohol, do you see with the current new government, there is talk of changes to that legislation that may repeal some of those powers? What impact would that have?
I can't speak for the government because I don't know what that is. Yeah. Unfortunately, but at the end of the day, we're all ruled by the government that's in power and the decisions that they make. But I think it's about taking action while it's available and still leading the way, and it doesn't stop the messages and the facts and the evidence and research that shows how harmful alcohol is and the ways to reduce it. And it's about, I remember when we came and presented at the first submission and hearing the community and the community voice of what they wanted to see and hearing about the impacts in Portuguese specifically, it's about how do we listen to what our community wants in a democracy, and how are we able to utilise the instruments and tools as a council to achieve the reduction in harm that we want to see. We want to be the leaders that we want our next generations, our mokopuna, our community to see that we're trying to do something. It's the action of trying and pushing against the system to achieve that fundamental change that we want to see. It might be.
Councillor Tanzos?
Thank you. Thanks for your presentation. Very helpful and interesting. and timely for us. I was going to go back to Mayor Victor's question around the data, because I saw something recently around that was saying that adolescent alcohol use had been in decline for a while. And I just had a quick look at it. I was looking at Action Point. It was saying that hazardous drinking is in decline. The prevalence among 15 to 7-year-olds almost halved from 2006 to 2015. So that's great. And I suppose my question is around, because when you talk about the culture around drinking, and you're quite right, that's what we have to address. You'd expect to see the gains among young people primarily, wouldn't you? Older people, I suppose, are more fixed in their habits. That's how they do things. But if we're seeing gains among young people, that means we're moving forward, doesn't it?
That would be. I would tend to agree with you. I think this is a long game.
Yeah.
I think lots of things in public health are very, very long games. And so having aspirational goals in an agreed direction that we want to head in is going to be really important. And that along the way, we test and challenge the approaches we've taken, and that we, through the collection of better and better data as well, better evidence, and test whether we are actually heading in the right trajectory. As we've sort of alluded to, we've got data, lots of studies which show that reducing the availability and access to alcohol has an impact on alcohol-related harm, but the granularity and the way it does needs more exploration and to be challenged as well. So I'm hopeful that with our intelligence team can actually make sure that we set up in place ways of measuring our progress.
I've got no further questions or clarification. Okay, well, thank you, Greg and Elliot, for presenting that, and
Thank you for your views.
you're welcome to remain for the rest of the meeting, or feel free to leave at your disposal, but thanks very much for coming.
Thank you for your feedback. Cheers.
We'll move on to confirmation of minutes. Please refer to page 8 of the agenda if you've got any corrections to the meeting minutes. Do I have a mover and a seconder to receive the minutes? Councillor Rangiaho, Councillor Boynton. No discussion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. We'll move to also page 8, the following minutes to be received. The Mirrapara Community Board, 27th November 2023. Whakatania Hopi Community Board, 27 November 2023. Rangataiki Community Board, 29 November 2023. Taneatua Community Board, 16th November 2023. And Community Funding Committee on the 8th of December 2023. I'll move all them together. So do we have a mover? Councillor Isles. Councillor Paula seconds. No discussion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you for that. We'll move to reports. 7.1, pages 9 to 17 on the agenda. Better Off Funding Program update. Will be given to us by General Manager of Strategy and Transformation, Stephen Purdia, and Better Off Funding Program Manager, Bill Tame. Just before they come forward, I'll ask Steph to, she's got something to say.
Thank you, Councillor James. And good morning, everybody. It's a full house this morning. Sorry, Steve, before you go, and my apologies because I meant to make an acknowledgement this morning, but you may have noticed that our flags are flying at half-mast today. So this is at the instruction of the Honourable Paul Goldsmith, the Minister, and it is in tribute to honour Whaanana Efeso Collins, who is being buried today, for his service to local government, and obviously he was just starting his central government career when unfortunately he passed last week. So my apologies, I meant to raise it at the beginning of the meeting, but just wanted to take a moment and acknowledge his passing and the tribute. So as I say, our flags are at half-mast today. Kia ora tātou, apologies for that interruption. Thank you, Councillor James.
Sorry, I didn't read the note earlier. Okay, so we move to pages 9 to the end of the agenda. We'll take it as read. Steve, do you have anything to contribute?
Morning, councillors. Just a couple of comments. This is our regular Better Off Funding program update of the 7 projects. When we kicked off this program of work, we were piloting some of the EPMO project templates, also the monitoring and providing some project support for the various project managers across these 7 projects. Each project is a different project manager. So we've also tested we've made some changes to the reporting template as well. We're starting to include where we're getting to with our project stages. So you'll see in the document concept, initiation, development, delivery and closure. And we're just sort of testing reporting through this forum, reporting where projects are at in terms of the project stage as well. Overall, the Better Off program is going pretty well. Quite a few greens in there. We've just got one orange around the Edgecombe to Thornton cycleway, and that's largely to do with just some shifting timeframes. But yeah, we're happy to take any questions, and Pearl has some good specific technical knowledge on some of the projects as well, so maybe able to talk to them if the GMs aren't here.
Okay, so I'll ask for questions of clarification. We've got Mayor Victor.
Yes, thank you, Steve. I'm wondering, Steve, if you can define what EPMO is or describe it for anyone that's listening online and in the audience.
It's our Enterprise Project Management Office, and what that does is provide oversight for the organisation, and that's the word enterprise, provides oversight to the organisation of project culture and the way the organisation runs projects, so some standardisation.
Councillor Ringer? No? Councillor Iles?
Thank you, Chair. Page 13 again, the CCTV upgrade. Notice there that the spend is at basically half of the budget, but just following on from yesterday's workshop, with the money that now has to be allocated to replacing, it's basically wiped out the balance of the budget as opposed to us being able to put in more CCTV cameras. Is that correct?
Yeah, so just overall on the budgets are as at the end of December, 31st of December? Oh, 30 January, okay, but more current. So, there might be some phasing and timing in regards to invoicing. Specifically on CCTV, we also have some funding banked for monitoring. And we'll just be working through DIA in order to understand how we manage those payments over time to the monitoring firm. We also have some spare budget, but we're also looking at that there was a couple of acts of vandalism we talked about in the update yesterday, so we're just sort of working through those fix-ups, but anything that is left over, we're looking at trying to put into the pot of money for monitoring over the next 3 years.
Deputy Mayor Emming?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Morning, Bill, meeting, Steve. Thanks. It's really kind of going back to the dollar value. So it was 5.7 million that we received. Did we receive that in our hot little hand, or was this all applying retrospectively after tasks have been completed?
So each project received a 10% upfront amount, and then we apply retrospectively to the DIA for the funds.
Like.
That's why we have a program manager. So Pearl manages the reporting to the committee, but also manages the invoicing and the reporting to the DIA.
And is there a timeline, sorry Mr. Chair, is there a timeline attached to that if we don't complete tasks in the timeline that we've set?
2027, so they should all be confirmed.
Still some time to get done.
All right, thank you.
Councillor Dukes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just on the Awa Trail, which is the orange, it's just saying that discussions are being held with the landowners to address their concerns and work on a solution. So are the discussions looking positive on that solution?
It's early days yet. We're still understanding what the concerns are, and also we've met with the group twice, but actually they have quite different concerns depending upon their properties. So we're actually, the team's just working through individual property meetings to be really clear about what their concerns are, and then we'll work through solutions. But it's an open communication at this stage.
Thank you.
Yeah, Victor.
I'm just wondering on the collective iwi policy hub, the drafting of terms of engagement, determining resource needs and all that other stuff, is that anything that comes to council eventually, or does it not? What's the intention there?
Perhaps I could talk to that. Yeah, just that's an operational matter between 5 parties involved. It's just an operational matter to get terms of reference set. It's a new way of working. It's really good to have your parameters and boundaries set very clearly and make sure that everybody's expectations and needs are met. So no, it's an operational matter.
No further questions. Councillor Isles.
Sorry, just one further I had actually from my first. The Horo Hapori vans that are scheduled to be here hopefully December in June. Have we got anywhere in the budget for operational expense going forward on those, Georgina?
Yes, we have accounted for operational expenses going forward, and there will be provision made through the long-term plan.
Thank you.
Councillor Tanzos.
Thank you. I had a couple of questions, or a few questions if I may. Just going through, so first of all, just coming back to the iwi policy hub. So it's in development, and so when will we be likely to see some kind of outputs generated from that that can feed into these really important
Program managers in place. We're working through those last points as was put on there around terms of engagement, and that is actually how the program manager works directly with the iwi. The program manager has had the initial meetings with both the climate change team and the spatial planning team, and now they're starting to work through iwi's availability to start to garner and pull all of that, extract all of that voice from iwi and work out how does that bolt into these existing projects. So the wheels are starting to turn. We've got a meeting tomorrow with the program manager to keep pressing on. You'll see WD take a slight step back as the program manager steps into that space and works with the respective team for those 2 projects and starts to speed up the engagement and working at place with each of the 4. Also, I would expect to start to see some return, actual voices probably mid-year. We're talking about a team of consultants that go out and engage with each of those iwi, pull that voice. They've got a week in air availability as well, and we'll start to see some actual ones.
Thank you, Paul. That's great. If I can keep going. I was interested in the Hono Hapori community outreach. I think I saw some social media.
Yes.
So that's just that's kind of just preempting or priming the communities. That's great. The active whakatane, coming back to that. So there's some delays, but it says the construction is scheduled to begin in May. So I guess what that means is we're not expecting those kind of difficulties to be to end the project. We've got some ways we can get around.
Yeah, a little bit more detailed. So the whole track itself is about 10 kilometres long, and it's broken down into 4 stages. Stage 1 is the part that they're looking to construct in May, and that is the Edgecombe Squash Club to just before the skate park. It's already a formed path, but it needs a bit of upgrading. So that is stage 1. Stage 4 is on top of the flood wall that's being redeveloped from Thornton Road down to Thornton Beach. You know, when you're driving past there, you'll see all those works currently underway. flood wall. But regional council won't be ready for us for about 12 to 18 months to put the cycleway on top of that part. And then the other two stages are from the skate park down to Thornton Road. And stage 2 is the one where we're currently working with the property owners. We're also in that work with the property owners looking at some contingencies, so what might be some options if we can't go along the flood bank. So we'll work through those as well.
Thank you, that's very good. And my last one, if I may, which is just around the Southern District Town Regen, because this is a really important project as well. And is Frank and his team involved in that? And how's that shaping up? Like, have we got the right people involved and engaged in that?
I'll leave that with you, David.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. Firstly, there's two projects, so one focusing in Minganui and then the other in Birapara. Frank's team is really developing the community plan work and focusing on Birapara particularly. Right. So the Better Off Funding project in Birapara is a little bit behind waiting for the community plan to just get to its end, which is to its natural conclusion. Yeah. So the focus is now on Minganui. It's had a couple of resets, but we are now just about to engage some consultants to help facilitate the conversations in that community. So I think it will now gain some momentum, and you'll start to see some of that output soon.
Because they'll have really great gains once that starts to get there. Thank you.
Hey, Victor.
Of the projects, the only one that's in amber is the active Whakatane Edgecombe Thornton Awa Trail. I'm wondering if you're able to expand on what the security concerns are for the committee, if you're able to do that. Security concerns are mentioned, but of what nature?
Oh, from the landowners?
Well, what it says here anyway.
Yeah, there's a range of concerns. The security one was a concern by those landowners that people would use the cycleway paths to access their properties for criminal activity. So yeah, we're working through that. I mean, there's actually quite a few arguments that would say, well, criminals would probably just use the road because of cars. But you know, sometimes you do have people who might be using footpaths that just want to vandalise something out of sheer spite for some reason, you know. But we can talk about things like cameras, lighting, and also just the vibrancy of areas. The more foot traffic you have, the less likelihood there is of that antisocial behaviour.
Okay, thank you. Councillor O'Brien.
We're talking about stage 2 and the reaction we're getting from landowners. Do we envisage having the same reaction from landowners in stage 3?
No, at this stage, not so much. The stage 2 is where a number of orchards are, and the orchard concerns are quite specific around, their businesses and security concerns around their business, plus also spraying and the requirements for a much stronger protection between where people walk and their farms and a few other things, but they are more specific to actually running those businesses in that particular area, and it's around about 1.9 kilometres worth of the track.
All right, thank you. No further questions? I'll move to the recommendations on page 9. The Living Together Committee received the Better Off Funding Program update. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Mayor Victor. Councillor Dennis. Any discussion? All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you for that. Move on to 7.2, the Whakatane Accessible and Inclusive Trust Memorandum of Understanding Report. I'll ask General Manager, People Engagement, Emlyn Hatch, and Senior Community Development Advisor, Karen Hayes, to come forward. And could I ask Karen to introduce the members of your group, please?
Atamarie councillors, ko Karen Summerhays tōku ingoa. I'm the Senior Community Development Advisor, and I'm going to put my glasses on. So I'm joined today with two representatives of the Whakatane Accessible and Inclusive Group. We've got Grant Chase and Ruth Gerson here today. There's an apology from the chairperson of the Trust, Scott Saunders, but I'm really pleased to present this MOU to you this morning, and we'll take the paper as read. I'm happy to outline the main points if wanted, or take questions. A note, it's been a real pleasure to work with the members of Y, it's the acronym, to develop this way of working, and I'd like to acknowledge their persistence and patience of the group to get this across the line. We're fortunate to have the guidance from such a passionate and knowledgeable group. Through you, Mr. Chair, I'll now hand over to Grant to say a few words on behalf of the group, and Ruth will also have a few words to say.
Kia ora, Karen. Kia ora koutou katoa. Tēnei te mihi ki te whare, tēnei te mihi ki te rani, tēnei te mihi kia papa. Tēnā koe tamanui te rā. Tēnei te mihi rātou kia rātou, tēnei te mihi tātou kia tātou. Mihi atu, tuturu whakamaua kia tīna. Hui e, tā iki e. Kia ora tātou.
Kia ora koutou, and thank you, Grant, for the mihi. There's another apology from the redoubtable Poihari Morris, who had a small accident yesterday and is rather bruised, unable to be here, but she's here watching us on the link. Kia ora, Poi, I don't know where I'm waiting for. I'm speaking for her. Probably without the panache that she would offer in an event like this, but I'll do my best. So, really, these are the things that we would like. First, we want to express our appreciation for this agreement and particularly thank the Council and Community Development staff, Karen, they played an invaluable role. It could not have got through its final stage without that huge amount of support from within the Council, so thank you for that. I just want to go back a bit and let you know that we have been working alongside the Council over the past few years, and some of our ideas have already come to fruition. So back in 2018, which is 5 years and more, we made a submission to the long-term plan, and we advocated for safe crossing places and ways for people on mobility scooters and wheelchairs to travel past schools through Kopiopio and to town, with the curbs and crossings all made safe for everyone, for prams, wheelchairs. And we've seen those recommendations come to fruition this year, and we're thrilled with the work that's gone on there. So it took time, but we got it there in the end, and we're very pleased. We have advised on several other projects, and right now we're supporting the emergency planning that's going on with Justin Douglas to ensure disabled people and seniors are catered for when the tsunami comes. So that's wonderful. And we're now looking forward to sharing our expertise with staff more regularly with this agreement in place. And we plan to contribute to the long-term plan, particularly requesting budgets that continue to address accessibility. So it's from us. Lovely to be here today. It's such a celebration for us to have reached this stage.
You're right. Thanks, Ruth. Anyone got any questions of clarification? Councillor Dukes?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Not a question of clarification, but just a thank you for all the hard work and persistence that you've put in to get us to this position. It means a lot to me. I have a vision impaired mother, so I know how difficult life can be. So it's great to have a charitable trust like yourself that is advocating for the disabled community. So a big thank you from me.
Councillor Puller.
You have a question this time.
Sorry.
Top of the list.
So, not meaning any disrespect, but is your organisation doing the same work as the Disabilities Resource Centre?
No, I think fundamentally our organisation is run by people with disabilities and seniors. I fall into that role these days. I can no longer call myself old middle age. So we do have seniors and disabled people, and this is their voice and their skills and their experience of what life is like to live in this town, which is kind of different from having a service that works for people with disabilities. It's about people having their own voice, and that's what we offer.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for your service to the community. I'm just checking out, so we have, as part of our documentation, the MOU agreement, and it's dated today. Is that getting signed today here? Now, or?
What's part of the recommendation?
More than 2 times.
Oh, right, sure, okay. Thank you.
Councillor Tanzos, sorry.
Thank you. Tēnā kōrua, tēnā koutou. And thanks for coming. This is really great to have this happening today, and you share your sense of celebration, because it's a really great step forward. Having a year like this. I suppose just carrying on from Councillor Puller's question, so to clarify, it's kind of you play more of an advocacy role, I suppose, is what I'm hearing. Right. Okay. And it's great to see that you said there's already things coming through. I think I remember going around Kopiopio on an electric scooter and seeing just how difficult it was to navigate those streets. So that was a really great learning experience for many of us, I think. I suppose my question is, and maybe this is early days, we'll no doubt get some representation, but do you have something in your sights?
I guess yes, there is something in our sights, but I mean, we're going to give information further to the long-term plan. But one of our serious concerns, particularly for those who are visually impaired, is the red crossings that do not comply with the guidelines of NZTA.
Right.
They, according to NZTA, they should only be in areas where there is a 30k limit, and there need to be speed humps, and we're very concerned about some of them. Because they rely on people catching the eye of the person who's driving to work out, like there's that negotiation. But if you're visually impaired, or some other people in wheelchairs, and that's not possible. So it's quite unsafe. That's our first one, but there are several other things that we hope to work through.
Councillor Boynton, did you have a question?
It was really going to be a statement. I was trying to think, how can I make this a question? Really, tēnei te mihi aroha, tēnei te mihi nui kia kōrua, kia koutou, mo tō mahi, mo tō manaaki, i ana tātou, iwi I roto I te hāpori. I just really wanted to acknowledge the extensive work that you've done, not just in these areas, but in many areas that it affects with our whānau disabilities, and knowing Poi Haere and also being part of Pau Whakaaro for quite a few years in terms of the challenges that our whānau face, not only physically, but having to engage with an entity or an authority to be able to make changes to improve not only their lives but our communities. So how do I make this a question?
Do you agree?
How significant is this memorandum of understanding for the organisation, for yourselves to reach this point, and what do you see it may be able to achieve in future?
I think it's really significant for us to be recognised by the council and by the council staff, and to actually have play a clear role within that. I think it's significant for the council. And certainly over the years, the last few years when we've been meeting, we have seen situations where we could have saved the council quite a lot of money, which I know is a bottom line for a lot of you, because things were just put in the wrong place or the right thing, and then it had to be changed later to make it suitable for the wheelchair to get out or whatever. So we think this will be good for everyone, not only for our members, but it will be a good thing for council too. So yeah, it's a huge milestone and it's just wonderful. Thank you.
Sorry. So also, our group, our main priority is accessibility for disabled persons and elderly around our community. Of course, public, right? That's you guys. So we need to work alongside you guys to address these issues that come up within, our community, within the public. So it's really important that we work alongside you.
Chief Executive Stephanie.
Kia ora, Councillor James, thank you. Nā mihi nui ki a koe, Grant, mo tō mihi tēnā kōrua. Ruth, it's lovely to have you in the chamber and it's lovely to see you both. And I just want to mihi to our community development team too, who, as you say, have been passionate guardians of this to make sure we've got here. And it was Councillor Isles and I who first came to that meeting with you in 2020, which feels like pre-COVID, a long, long time ago. And I just want to respond to Councillor Pollard that actually we had that first meeting in the Disability Resource Centre building, and Bronwyn Fox has been a very strong supporter of this kaupapa. And I'm delighted that we're here today, and you've acknowledged some of the things that have happened already and the opportunity in the future, Ruth, and I can see there are plenty of opportunities. This building and the refurbishment of this building took into account everything that Bronwyn Fox had advised on behalf of the group for us, and we've recently had a range of support groups using our facilities which have worked really well for them because they have accessibility built into this floor now. The fact that we're here and we can use it as a testament to the work that your group has done, and I'm really grateful for that. We've got accessibility provisions in our open places and spaces strategy now, for tamariki to be able to get to use parks and playgrounds. So it's the whole age spectrum. We want to all live in an inclusive and thriving community, and I'm really delighted that we're here today and we've got to this point. I guess I want to say thank you because I realise you had to go through some organisational issues to form a group, and that's not always easy for community groups to go through those processes. So I want to acknowledge the time and effort you've all put in to become a formalised group through which we can sign this MOU today and formalise that and have the importance of this kaupapa recognised in our community. So I'm delighted to see it, and I know our councillors will look forward to your LTP submission, and we'll look forward to just working with you practically on the ground, Ruth and Grant. So thank you very, very much.
Councillor Isles.
Thank you, Chair. Kia ora tātou, and thank you again for your presentation. Basically, just following on from Steve's conversation, I guess it could be perceived that I do have a conflict, but I guess on the other hand, I'm also a councillor with a disability, so I really feel that I live in that space very comfortably. And of course, being a trustee on DRC and also chairing the Waka Accessible Transport Trust, I have worked very closely with members that are here today. And I want to acknowledge Nancy, who's sitting in the second row. Nancy would be a great user of the accessible transport. Again, the work that you've done is certainly ongoing. My question to you is, how would you, or what would you like to see going on in our satellite town with regards acknowledging people that in those remote communities are still dependable on issues that you've raised this morning, Ruth, regards crossings, etc.?
Thank you, Councillor Isles, because we haven't really got there yet. And you've reminded us of that need to get there. We don't have members yet from some of those communities, and we need to do the work to go out and make sure that they're included. So thank you very much.
I guess
that is one of our goals.
The reason I raised it, again, through the accessible transport, we are getting calls from people in those remote towns needing to access Whakatane. And again, there are issues that we could address through many forms. So, yeah, thank you for that, Ruth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just in response to Councillor Isles, the community planning that's going on, those issues can certainly be raised within the community planning framework and hopefully be addressed through those.
Thank you.
Councillor Dennis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Ruth and Grant, for your persistence I hope that you keep persisting and because you obviously achieved quite a bit. And also thank you, Karen, for the way you've worked with this group and brought them to the fore. My question is in regard to those red crossings on the roads, and my understanding is they're not legal crossings, they're just there to attract attention for people to slow down in case someone is crossing. And in fact, there's still a bit of debate as to whether the pedestrians have the right of way, and I don't think they do. Would you prefer for your group that we get rid of the red crossings and we put in the legal pedestrian crossings with the white striped lines? Would that be a better way to do it?
Yep, that would fix the problem.
So you feel that the red crossings are more confusing and more dangerous for your people rather than...
Yeah, I'm not that involved in the project, but Scotty is so passionate about it. And from what I know of it, these red crossings are in areas where black and white crossings should be. So the one that he's most concerned about is right outside the retirement village, along Ocean Road, is it? Or Harbour Road? Yeah, it's right there for them.
You see it more dangerous for your people rather than... And in that same question...
But the road limit along there is 60.
Yeah, thank you. In that same question, I noticed between the McGarvey Road, between the Evers Road roundabout on Landing Road and the King Street one, there's a safety island in the middle for people to be able to go across and...
stop it.
Yeah. Is that accessible for people in wheelchairs, or do you find that more difficult with wheelchair access? I'm sure for other people it's quite a safety area, but with wheelchairs, is that actually helpful, or is it a hindrance?
I haven't heard any problem about that, and I think you can get a mobility scooter through. And can I say that red crossings, like, you know, in the centre of town here, and even some of those ones like at the corner of Salonika Street and those where they've got raised humps, so people have to slow down, are okay. It's just when it's 50 zone and everyone drives at 60, we all know that. And the other thing that I'd like councillors to think about is the fact that we now have a lot of electric cars. So if you're visually impaired, you think of standing there with your eyes closed trying to cross that road. You can't see what's happening and you don't know when the time is to cross. So how dangerous is that? So when you can't hear it.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Rangiaho.
Tēnei te mihi atu kia koutou katoa. And listening with you, how hard you guys have worked to get to this stage for your MOU. As a previous community support worker for Healthcare New Zealand and in the rest home and understanding those needs. I'm reading this MOU and I'm looking at the termination on there. I don't think we'll get to that. I think that's going to grow in terms of this. But probably the biggest question I want to ask you is, you ready to sign? Must be ready to sign. Yeah. Yes, we are. That's it. Just ready to sign.
Thank you, Councillor. No further questions. I'm actually going to break my own rule here and just make a comment that after having spent a mere 3 months on an e-scooter last year, I was very appreciative of everything that's getting done to help you people. So, right, we'll move to the recommendations on page 18. Whakatane Accessible and Inclusive Trust Memorandum of Understanding report be received, and also that the Living Together Committee note the following. That the Living Together Committee note the following. The Chief Executive will sign an operational memorandum of understanding with Whakatane Accessible and Inclusive Trust dated 29 February 2024. The MOU commits Council to develop a diversity and inclusion policy, and a paper on the development of that policy will be presented at an upcoming Living Together Committee meeting. Do I have a mover?
Yeah.
Councillor Isles, Councillor Rangiaho, Any discussion? All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried.
Well done.
Thank you, everyone. We'll move to 11 morning tea now, 10 o'clock, so we'll have a 15-minute break and come back at 10:15. During this break, Steph will sign the MOU with you and take some photos, eh?
Yeah.
So now and come back after morning tea, 10:15. Thank you.
Then you must have. I just looked.
We will reconvene the meeting now. A quick reminder that this meeting is being live streamed. We go to item 7.3, Rex Morpeth Recreational Hub Master Plan Update, February 2024. On pages 25 to 32 of the agenda, and I'll hand over to Community Experience General Manager Georgina Fletcher and Senior Reserves Advisor Sarah Evans to talk to the report.
Thank you, Councillor James. Morena tātou. Today's report is just to provide you with an update on the project ahead of your long-term planning discussions. We are seeking 2 resolutions that the report be received, and an acknowledgement that any decision regarding this project will be made as part of the draft long-term plan budgeting process. I am proposing an amendment to the second resolution because that decision regarding the draft long-term plan budget will be made by the Environment, Energy and Resilience Committee and not Council, so it is proposed that the word Council is deleted and replaced with Environment, Energy and Resilience Committee. So that the purpose of that resolution is just to make it very clear that no decision is being made by the Living Together Committee regarding the Rex Morpeth Recreation Hub project, and that that major decision regarding the inclusion of the project in Council's draft budget will be made next week by the Environment, Energy and Resilience Committee. The paper does, I guess, provide you, recap the work that has been done that we did last year in 2023 in terms of the development of master plan options, the detailed community feedback, and the process that we went through to analyse that feedback. And so detailed analysis was done in relation to the functionality, accessibility, flexibility, and the financials and the leverage of the project in order to come up with a recommended master plan, which was recommended by the consultants, but again it's important to note that no preferred master plan has yet been agreed to by the Living Together Committee or Council. This report provides you with further detail on what are considered necessary improvements to the recreation hub in terms of for the hub to function safely and for it to be functional. And there is a table in paragraph 8.3 that provides you with more detail on those essential works. The report also reminds you that this is not a new project. We've talked to the community for over a decade, and financial support and previous long-term plans have allocated budget for this project. In fact, we continue to communicate with our key users and submitters on this project. We provided them with an update this week ahead of the release of this report, and one wrote back to me and said that she submitted first in 1995. This person is a key user of the facility and runs sport within the hall. She says she's been very patient, but she is getting tired of waiting and does not wish to wait another 30 years for something to be done. So, so it's a reminder that this really isn't a new project, but the scale of it has grown, and of course the cost of completing the project has grown, as have all construction costs over time. So, it really is an update paper, and we look forward to further decisions on this project being made as part of the long-term plan process.
Thanks, Georgina. Open it up for questions and clarification. Councillor Puller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and it is a question again. Georgina, the report tends to lean, and it's going out for consultation, tends to lean towards upgrading the existing hall rather than perhaps a rebuild, but and that table talks about refurbishment rather than rebuild. So how will that be conveyed to, during the consultation there, that other options are available? Or are they not available?
Yes. So, Councillor Pullen, the master plan option recommended by the consultants last year was to refurbish the existing hall. In order to reach their decision, they had a number of criteria, one of which was price. And so the refurbishment of the hall, the weighting that was applied to price did score quite highly. The refurbishment option was the cheaper of the options versus constructing an entirely new hall. But again, that decision has not been made yet. The work that we did last year has put us in a really good place to include, should the committee choose to, include provisional sums, provisional and realistic sums of money to include in the budget, so that when a decision is made on which option to proceed with, there is sufficient funding there.
Can I just add, so in the LTP document there will be options?
In
There's
the
a recommended option, but there's a range of options, is that right?
In the long-term plan there will be options around, it will not ask, because we've already consulted the community on which master plan option. The long-term plan will focus more on the scale of the project, the timing that the community would like to see it delivered, and the external funding that will be required to be achieved. It is a large project, and there'll be many points along the way where decisions will be required. So there will, if it's included in the final long-term plan, there will be another decision-making process regarding which option to proceed with in terms of redevelopment or rebuild.
And how it's going to be staged all the way through. Thank you.
That's a pity in some ways, but anyway, that's another story. Thank you.
Okay, can I just remind everyone when you're asking questions that you speak up and speak clearly, so apparently the people down the back do struggle at times to hear. So, Deputy Mayor Iming.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Thank you, Georgina and Sarah. Just probably following on from Councillor Puller's one, so if it goes out to consultation on option 1, and I know external funding is dependent on having to co-fund that part, we could at that stage also change or upgrade to option 2 if the external funding looked like it was going to become available, could we? Or once you decide on option 1, 2 or 3, you've got to stick with it?
So no decision has been made on whether on the options.
Okay.
We've got a recommendation from the consultant, and the proposal is to include a provisional budget, which would allow us, that would be sufficient enough to proceed with a variety of options. Thanks.
Councillor Isles, did you have a question? No. Councillor Dennis?
Thank you, Mr Chairman. I've got two questions, and one is the way that this is drawn up the table in 7.3, I found a bit confusing because there's no totals at the end of each option, and I'm thinking that might be a good idea. But when it comes to the decision, will there be an opportunity to mix and match? Like you might want option 1 in the sports hall and option 2 in something else. Is that available, or are we just going to go to one option or the other? In which case I think we need to actually put a green total at the bottom of it. My main question is, under the additional car parks, under option 2 you've got minor improvements to the domain road entrance, etc., with 50 additional car parks. But then when you go into the next option, you're talking 50 to 100 car parks. Is that on top of the 50 at Domain Road, or is that in total? Because it seems to go from 150,000 to 1 million very quickly for an additional 50 50 car parks only cost 150,000. If we go to an additional 100, it's got to 1 million. I find that a bit confusing.
I will answer your first question. And again, these are just options, no decision, and we're not seeking a decision at this point as to which option to proceed with in terms of these necessary improvements. And I will ask Sarah to answer the question regarding car parking.
If I can answer the part of the question about the table, the options in the columns are not all that option together. It is the option for the rugby grandstand. These are the 4 possible options. There could be for the playground. These are the 4 possible options. So it could be a mix and match, but it does have to come through that massive plan. In terms of the car parks, those are based on the costs we have in the survey about certain areas of the car parking and roading upgrades. So they did have some breakdowns so that if your domain road entrance is improved and the car parking put through there, this is an estimate of that cost. If we put car parks next to the existing car park near the hall, this is that amount. At this stage, we don't know the exact preferred number for certain activities or what is appropriate to put in there. So that detail is, we know they need a lot more at certain times. That exact number is not there. But for car parking to happen in certain areas, other upgrades do need to happen as well.
So you're saying that option 3 would include option 2 in the number of car parks? Would it be 50 in one area and 50 in the other, or are we talking 150 in total?
That is up to 100 car parks on top of what's existing on the site now. That would be the domain road car parking area, plus you'd add in more.
So 150,000 to do the 50 at Domain Road car park, and then 850,000 to do another 50. Maybe we could look into that. That seems a little bit weird.
It is quite high level estimate, and that initial 50 would be no other infrastructure happening around those, so no rebuilding of access onto a main.
Sarah, sorry, can I just ask you to speak up?
Sorry,
thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Boynton?
Kia ora mihi atu kia whai, Georgie, for your report. I just wanted to, I see there about the critical steps that need to be made around safety with the building, and also too with the inability to utilise the kitchen services. If the premises was unable to be used, what impact would it have on the community in terms of the amount of groups and that utilise it, in terms of the amount of times that the area and the building is used? What impact in terms of numbers would that have?
Would you like to answer, Sarah? And I can add anything.
So for the individual parts of the hall, if you take into account just the little theatre itself, there is no other facility of that size in the district for any shows or performances to happen. So that stops every end of year dance recital, every theatre production, any small shows travelling here, any other small shows, that would stop that happening in Whakatane at that scale immediately. And that is a huge number of groups that use just that space. The reception lounge is used regularly by darts, I'd say weekly, to a national level, and that they would need to find somewhere else quickly. It's not as used as much as it has been in the past, the reception lounge. The hall is used daily, from sports to events, but it would stop at least a lot of primary school level sports happening straight away. So the impact, I think, is huge. There's no other facility in the district or the Eastern Bay of that size to cater for those activities.
So this is supplement. So you're looking at more than a few hundred. You're looking at thousands of children and groups and individuals that would be impacted if we do not take care of them.
Councillor Rangiahu.
Hey Sarah, hi. I want to have a look at 8.2 on page 29 for the master plan cost estimates. Now it talks about the first round of cost estimates completed by the quantity surveyor. Cost confirmed as between 84.5 million and $110 million. Is that for the whole project? You know, I'm trying to understand, is that just the first round for this project and then you go in another stage, different stages, and then the council has to go back and get more funding, or, you know, is that that?
That costing is the whole of the master plan as recommended by the consultant team. So that covers the whole 10 years of stay full time that they recommend.
And the stages, and the different stages. Oh,
The complete delivery
is the clue. Oh, yeah, okay.
all state, all recommended.
So when you say first round, it goes, right, is there a second and a third round coming up with $110 million?
There will always be more that we could do because, for example, the proposed master plan, it allows for the expansion of the aquatic centre, but it doesn't provide for it within that price. There will always be demand for more, but
It's understanding that figure inside of it, and it probably don't yet go as far as what we may think it does.
Mayor Victor.
I'm on page 30 on the table there, the rugby grandstand seismic work. It says required under the Building Act 1994 to carry out seismic work by 1st of July 2036, which is a long way away. Now that grandstand's seen a bit of seismic activity in its lifetime, and it's still there. I'm just wondering about how required is required, because we've already learned from this building that as to whether or not it's necessary to do work depends on an engineering model for which you can tweak some parameters and get a different answer. So whereas seismic work was required, it turned out to look like it wasn't necessary. Do we have the underlying engineering done on this grandstand already, and is it clear cut?
yes, we do. Unfortunately, David Bewley has had to leave, but yes, all council buildings were assessed a number of years ago, and so works are required. We are legally required to carry out works under the Building Act to the grandstand. The question then becomes, what is it worth the investment, or do we look at some level of seating that would provide for potentially multiple fields or be incorporated into other buildings? So at what scale? It's a sensible point to, so rather than charge ahead and just repair the grandstand as it is, it's one of the reasons that we have chosen to look at the entire hub of facilities.
May I see the engineering study that's done on that at some point?
Yes, you may. I believe a number of them are actually on our website, but I will confirm.
Thank you.
Councillor Puller.
Chair, Sarah, just following on from Councillor Boynton's question, is it spelled out anywhere that hall won't be available for use in the reno option? I mean, if you build a new one, you could use the hall in the meantime, but that's quite a big impact, isn't it, for a period of time? Has that been taken into account anywhere?
We haven't taken into account at that detail at this stage, but in discussions with the users to date, we have said that part of the process, once we get to what will happen with that building, that we'll be working with them to figure out a solution, because there will be times when part, if not all, of a building may be available to use. So it will be looking at what other facilities the council has, or schools, or what else is available in the community for certain time periods to use. But that process is not completed yet.
But will it be spelled out in the consultation document that that's what will happen or needs to happen? I'm just trying to see that we get everything out there in the public space, really.
It was definitely discussed at the key users workshops with key users. That should have, I think that has come through in some of our documents and previous reports, but yeah, it has been brought up by a number of the users, and we're well aware and have indicated we will work together to find solutions if they are needed.
Councillor Ives.
Thank you, Chair. The rugby grandstand, or the rugby park as we know it, in earlier discussions it had always been a consideration that it could possibly have landed as a retirement or residential development. Has that option now been totally discounted, that this is going to be part of the Rex Morpeth upgrade should that take place?
You were provided with a detailed report which analysed the potential for Rugby Park to be used for either housing or a retirement village. I guess again, no final decision has been made yet in terms of proceeding with the Recreation Hub project, but all elected members have been provided with that analysis, and we can provide it as part of future decision making. But the analysis was quite clear that, or the recommendation from the consultants, that the land was, that they did not recommend that Rugby Park be redeveloped for housing or retirement village purposes. Sarah might provide a little, if you want some rationale.
Part of the main reason around that is the land is a reserve land for recreational purposes under the Reserves Act, and the process to change that from reserve land to any other use is extremely lengthy, costly, and there's no guarantee. If there's one party that objects, that can halt the whole process happening. So it is important consideration when that is one of your largest areas of reserve land in your central area. So there is some major hurdles to change the status of that land.
I appreciate as elected members we are aware of all those conditions, but again it would be nice to have that possibly noted in the LTP document, that the process or the alternate use would be really prolonged, restrictive, etc., because it has been mooted, especially since Apihi came off the agenda. Where is there a possibility for a retirement or residential?
Thank you. Councillor, no further questions? We will move to recommendations on page 28 of the agenda. I'll take them as two separate recommendations. Number one, that the Mātātou, our people, our spaces, Rex Morpeth Recreational Hub Master Plan Update, February 2024 report be received. Do I have a mover? Councillor Boynton, Councillor Dennis second. Any discussion? Tanzos?
I'll put it here because it wasn't really a question, but it was just really just the comment that we need to work really hard to ensure that we hear from the full breadth of our community on this issue, because the discussion in the public's really been dominated by one narrow interest group who I think have a really short-term view of the well-being of our community. And it's really important that we as councillors make decisions on what's the best for our whole community in the long term, and particularly for growing families and for young people. And so it's just really a note that we just need to really make sure we do our best to hear from as wide a section of the community as we can, particularly on this issue, which has got heated in the public.
Thanks for that. The recommendation, we are, Deputy Mayor, we are only receiving this report.
Yeah, it's just following just a statement, just to provide some context. We did a full upgrade of the hockey turf carpet last year. The time frame was 3 to 6 weeks. If we had good weather, it took 4 months. The hockey, I think you'll find that these sports and theatre groups, if they're going to get an upgrade, even if it's a refurbishment of the facility, they will make their own plans on how they can keep their competitions going. and the feedback afterwards will just be amazing. So yes, there's inconvenience. They already know about it because they're already submitting on it, so they'll be well prepared. Yeah.
Thank you for that. No further debate. We've got a mover and a seconder to receive the report. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. The recommendation 2 on page 28 is that the Living Together Committee note that the decision to include the Recreational Hub Master Plan project in the draft 2024 to 34 long-term plan budget for community consultation will be made by the Environment, Energy and Resilience Committee as part of the long-term planning process. We have a mover, Councillor Boyden, Councillor Rangiaho. Do we have any discussion on this? Victor?
I don't agree with Councillor Tanshos. I don't think it's a particular narrow interest group that's not in favour of this. I mean, I'm out there in the community and it's not what I'm hearing, and I don't hear just from one sector. So I would think that all our consultation is done with a view to reaching as many people as possible. I don't think there's any need to particularly emphasise that we do it, because we do it, or don't we? Isn't that our objective?
Thank you. Any other debate? Okay, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Move on to section 7.4. Thank you, Sarah. Awatapu Lagoon, Sullivan Lake and Matata Lagoon recommended environmental improvements. Again, Georgina and Manager Open Space Operation there, Maloney. Welcome, Ian. On pages, Eugenia, 33 to 208 report. So, it was a good read.
A long read.
A long read.
Thank you, Councillor James. We have our independent consultant Keith Hamill here with us today. Keith is the author of the reports into the water bodies that we are discussing today. The purpose of the report is simply that, to provide you with an update on all of the work that Keith has done in relation to Awatapu Lagoon, Sullivan Lake and Matata Lagoon. He is the expert, and he is here to answer your queries. There is obviously, in relation to the recommendations that Keith has made, there is budget allocated to there is budget amounts associated with those recommendations. Again, any decision regarding proceeding with the improvements will be made as part of the long-term plan process.
Speak?
Thanks, Keith.
Kia ora tātou. Ko Keith Hall. I'm a water quality scientist, an ecologist, run a company called River Lake Limited. I've been working in rivers, lakes, water quality for the last 25 years. I'm very excited to have the opportunity to look at Awatapu Sullivan Lake. So I thought maybe I'd start by briefly giving a little summary of lake by lake, and maybe so I can get to questions after each lake. That way I'm not talking too long. Very heartened to hear at least some people did get from beginning to end. I was only expecting the executive summary to be read, to be honest. So I'll start with Awatapu unless anyone has a preference. So Awatapu was formed in 1970 as an oxbow lake when the Whakatane River was diverted. It's got sort of three major components. So Wainui Te Whara comes in to the central lagoon, flows out the western lagoon via flat gates to Whakatane River. The southern part of the lagoon near the netball courts is pretty much stagnant. Water flows in and out to floods. Tidal water comes in through the flap gates, and now I've got fish-friendly flap gates there. So you get this little small tidal range in the lagoon, only 10 mils tops. And a little bit brackish, which is really interesting. I'll briefly touch on that. So a little bit brackish water comes in and you get this nice little halo climb happening in the South Lagoon. It's got a lot of values. It can be, pretty paru, as the school students tell me as I've been out there, but it's got a lot of values. It's got heaps of habitat for birds, a lot of birds including Australasian coot, bukiko of course, and dabchick, which is one of our rarer birds around here. A few bittern occasionally. It's got a surprising number of fish get through it, and then up into the Wainuru Te Whara stream. Long fin eel, short fin eel, banded kokapoo, giant kokapoo, bunch of bobbies, common giant. And it's got a lot of potential for recreation, although that's not really realised. Because of how it's seen, and because I think historically how it's been seen as a bit of a rubbish dumping ground. But it's also got a lot of issues that have been with it a long time. So it's got fairly poor water quality, quite high phosphorus coming in, recirculating from the sediments. It's got a lot of cyanobacteria, occasionally, not like Sullivan's Lake, we'll get there. But you do commonly get cyanobacteria blooms, which potentially you see as like green scum on the water. The bacteria, microbiological water quality is actually okay, not too bad from the results we've got, but hasn't had a huge amount of monitoring, but the monitoring results, it shows it okay in that regard. But I wouldn't advise any swimming in a few days after a flood event or rain. It's got this very interesting situation where it stratifies. Well, a shallow lake, it's only like 1.8 metres deep mostly. There's a few deep pools, 4 metres deep, and it stratifies between the top water and the bottom water separate out, and the bottom water doesn't get any oxygen because it doesn't get any separate from the surface. And so when you've got a lot of organic matter, very quickly the oxygen starts to disappear from the bottom water, so you get lower and lower and lower until you get none at all. And at that time, all the geochemistry changes. You get a big pulse of nutrients, ammonia and phosphorus coming out of that sediment. Normally you don't see it in shallow lakes, you do see it in Awatapu because it gets brackish water, and so that's an issue, but it also raises opportunities for how you manage that phosphorus release, which I might do. But the big issue with Awatapu, the big issue that's been there almost since it was first formed, a few years after it was formed, is the hornwort, the macrophytes, this excessive growth of hornworts and Carisphera going over the lagoon. And in the South Lagoon, it's a complete coverage almost. Thick floating mats, half metre thick. Birds walk over, gets pushed about by the wind a bit. And underneath that, you get very low dissolved oxygen. And then it dies, anesthes in the winter, sinks to the bottom, and that sucks out more dissolved oxygen. So mostly in the South Lagoon, around the delta, but also throughout the lagoon you see these floating mats, and at times it's worse than others. But even in the main open lagoon, I've been measuring it underneath those mats. It goes from supersaturation because it's photosynthesizing underneath the mat, bang, you're down to 10% saturation, which is too low for any fish, even your tolerant eels, your tough goldfish. And so when they get to that sort of oxygen level, they'll be scooting to a different part of the lagoon. And when they haven't been able to get there, you see fish death. And that's some observations we were making over the last few years when you get these big extinctions. So there are fish there, but it's not all a happy place by any means for them. And so that comes down to what our solutions. And I've put down a number of key things for Awatapu, which I'll briefly go through and then I'll open up for questions on how you want to address this. And the first thing I would be advising for Awatapu is macrophyte harvesting to just get that dense macrophyte cover down. And that is what is driving, it's directly affecting DO because it's too thick, but it's indirectly affecting DO because it sinks to the bottom, and then when you get the stratification, a lot of organic matter just to be sucking the oxygen out. And Yeah, and it's preventing native plants coming through as well. So harvesting, and potentially, in the past we've really driven for using herbicides. Herbicides are effective, and I'll go into that. Sullivan's have been completely effective there, but but you just kind of you still get that massive growth growing, and then you just kill it and it sinks to the bottom. You still get that issues with the recycling of nutrients and sucking up the oxygen, high biodiversity. So harvesting is a great way to go, but it's not particularly cheap, but it does work, and you can work harvesting and use of herbicides intermittently if you get that biomass down and then get on top of that growth as it regrows, and then come back and do another harvest and get it down again. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there. Creating wetlands, it's another big opportunity. There's some plans have been put in place, but even if you can't do the big plan, right, the big plan of creating really big wetlands, there's some simple areas to work with in Awatapu, like around the Delta area where it's already very shallow and it's been played around with machinery over the years, where you could have an opportunity to create quite extensive inlake wetlands for quite low cost because it's already shallow and we've already got to dispose of some of that material from the Wainuitu whara somewhere, right? So other options like phosphorus locking need a bit more investigation. That has worked exceptionally well in many lakes, and in Rotorua lakes, Lake Rotorua, it's worked amazingly well. But it doesn't always work. In Lake Ehu hasn't worked at all well because it's a little bit complex with the chemistry, and so if we're going down that track, you need to go there slowly to get some confidence it's going to be an effective option. Because the materials you use, phosphorus locking, depend on your pH and your DO of when and where. So iron goes anoxic, not going to work. Aluminium products works great at anoxia, but you get very high pH releases that phosphorus again. So there's a bit of complexity there. Floating wetlands, managing nutrients down the catchments, probably a good option. The last one I also want to flush on, which again I'm pushing out as an option, but it addressed a lot of iwi concerns about trying to get more flow through the lagoon. It was taking flow through the Whakatane River. Now, when this was first raised, I thought, there's no head. Yeah. You can't get flow without head. But they've done a bit of work there with data loggers in the river and the lagoon. There was no head. There was no head between the old inlet and the outlet, but there was a big tidal range. And if you have a system of flat gates, as what happens up Kaituna River, when we diverted the Kaituna into Makaturi Street, we have flat gates, but they're a one-way flat gate system. So the water goes in, it can't go out. So if you have a system of flat gates, you potentially can get a good flow of water into Awatapu. So if you put a big 1.2 metre culvert in, you could get maybe 60 litres a second as a tidal average. So over monthly average, only coming in at high tides, more at a spring tide, less at a neap tide. But that would cost a lot of money because to put a hole in the stop bank requires deconstructing, reconstructing, protecting the stop bank in the meantime, working with regional council. But there is an alternative option that possibly would work, getting a similar amount, maybe 60-70 litres a second as a tidal average through a 75 mil diameter pipe, using siphon systems. And in the past, I guess that really was dismissed when I first came into this job. Siphon's not going to work on a tidal system because you get a big airlock, right? You have to suck the air out every time, every 12 hours, 6 hours. But there is some new technology out there that does that for you, that sucks that air out very effectively. And so you could, for much less cost, for actually a reasonable cost, you could get a siphon system that could actually pull. So that's an option, but it's not. What would it do? It would help the Southern Lagoon, it would help with flushing, but it's not, in my view, a priority for the water quality because we still see a lot of the same water quality issues. So the main ones I'm pushing for this is you need to get on top of that macrophyte growth, and we need wetlands. And that's going to be, you're going to hear that again and again from me in the next 20 minutes. If you want water quality, you cannot get good water quality in a small, shallow lake without plants, unless you're managing it like a swimming pool, really, really heavily, which some people do. But you need some plants in there, and then you need that balance of getting the plants, right? Not some plants, but not too much, like Awatapu has with the weeds and all. So I'm going to stop there on Awatapu and leave it for questions.
Do you want to take questions on Awatapu separately, or?
I think that might be helpful. Otherwise, we might.
Okay. Councillor Isles.
Thank you, Chair. Keith, thanks so much for that report. Noxious weed, the parrot's feather in particular at Awatapu, and of course the water lily over at Sullivan's Lake, as you indicated, you can use glyphosate. Also, the dead matter that builds up on the floor of each of these lagoons. It's a massive cost if it was done at longer periods, where unfortunately we the council tend to sort of just push it out. If we were to do, say, an annual maintenance, are we looking at some sort of more realistic figure as opposed to the long term, because we have ongoing effects, especially at Sullivan Lake with the dead ducks, etc., and you're indicating also with the fish, you get so low that So would there be advantages, and can it be managed in the way of combination of spraying and removal, or is there a preferred?
Yeah, I think it can. I think you can. I think with all these lakes, we just need to try and keep ourselves thinking holistically. It's very easy to hook into one solution. Spray it out. That's our job done, and then we create other problems. But yeah, I think harvesting to get the biomass down, and then some spray to keep it low, and then you might have to come back to it and harvest, something like that. Or in the case of Sullivan's, I'll come to Sullivan's. I think maybe it's a slightly different solution there.
Thank you.
Councillor Puller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I guess this is following on from Councillor Isles, but more a question for ourselves, is that it applies to the whole three items that Keith's going to talk about, but we've had a zillion reports, and we're going to do this and we're going to do that and we're going to do the other, and we do nothing. And these are assets that we should be looking after. So my question is, are we going to do something about it?
Yeah.
Well, who's going to answer that? I guess it's on our plate, but really, we must do something. We promised to do stuff, we don't do it.
Yeah,
so how are we going to overcome that?
I think you're right, John. Sorry, I should let you talk, shouldn't I? Yeah, sorry.
Mr. Chair, through you.
Yeah.
Just to sort of add to that is I think the purpose of getting Keith in was actually to develop a program. We can look at over a long period of time and actually make sure that we make allowance to implement that project. Otherwise, it's worthless.
I think, John, when I tried to keep these reports focused on some options that could happen, but even within these options, as I've alluded to, they can be scaled at different levels. Like for the wetland one, it might, the full option there might be too much. So you think, can we afford that? And you can scale it back. But I think the important thing is, as you say, just to start and just to do something. And then that provides a key and a lead for community groups to work with. So wetland development, you can do it a lot cheaper than maybe it's been costed at. If you're working along with community groups, you get free labour and health and safety. But you have to start somewhere, right?
If I may, Mr. Chair, we have to probably do a reasonable amount to allow the groups to then take it on, don't we? Because at the moment we've got quite a big job, really. And we're going to have to spend some cash no least about that. But if we've got it to a level where then the community groups are able to maintain, that would be a bigger assessment of it. So I just keep saying we've got to do something about it.
Mayor Rector?
I've got a couple of questions. What would happen if we just did nothing, which is what we're doing, isn't it? I mean, what would be the end result?
With Awatapu,
The end point, would it just turn all into a big weed, or would it find an equilibrium by itself?
it's been like this for decades, at least the mid-80s, probably before. First reports of excessive weed in 1974, only 4 years after it was formed. So, in the 1990s, the first management plan came out. All the same issues are flagged. Sanapiti Te poor water quality, excessive weed eruption. So, it took along. We like it is.
Nature
Now
will
and
find its
10 years
equilibrium.
time, and it will. Maybe will it get worse? I don't know. You know, we stop pumping out the methane and the carbon from those anoxic bottom sediments. How that solidifies.
A second question. I mean, fundamentally, there's a problem of nutrients. The problem is you want to stop the weeds growing, right? The noxious, excessive growth of noxious weeds, which is being stimulated by nutrients, in particular phosphorus, which doesn't have to go up by very much to cause a problem. We're talking ppb concentrations. I like the phosphorus blocking idea. There are, of course, lots of materials you can use. You've only mentioned a few of them. The list is very long, and some of the ones you mentioned are prohibitively expensive. Things like zeolites, expanded clays, and all of that sort of stuff. But there are cheaper options that aren't on your list. So, this is like fairy dust. You can sprinkle it around and it could potentially work and would be potentially inexpensive. But again, it's almost like an experiment. You're trying it. Although these things might work in some settings, in your particular setting, we don't really know. So you could try it in a part of the lagoon and see if it works, or...
That's right. You trial it like that. You do some tabletop type trials first with the sediments you're working with, and then water quality conditions. You've got pH conditions and salinity conditions, and then you'd scale that up.
iron oxide's like what we're using in the Braemar water plant works as a phosphorus scavenger. That a very rudimentary form of that would be quite effective. So I kind of like that as a something that you could test out and see if it works at a very modest cost. And the phosphorus source, where is that? Mainly the surrounding. Is that leaking in from the wastewater systems? Sorry, not wastewater systems. Stormwater systems, the surrounding neighbourhoods. Is that where the source of the
question? I mean, the Whakatane River is naturally high in phosphorus because of the volcanic source, and all the volcanic part of our plains to the west. So, but the concentrations in the lagoon are twice as high again. So, which will be this internal release from sediments when it goes anoxic and the change in the geochemistry and pumping it out.
But it also could be concentrating in there.
Potentially with
external source.
Now, I don't know what historic issues in the past, historic sources that have a legacy within the sediment as well.
Thanks.
We'll take Councillor Tanzos, and then if you could continue on to Awatapu. Sullivan, sorry.
Councillor Dennis has got a question. Thank you. First of all, Keith, thank you. It's great to have such a comprehensive analysis of what the conditions are, what the issues are. I just remember the first time I went down to the Awatapu Lagoon, I was just blown away by what an incredible place it was. It's huge, expanse of water, beautiful reserve. I saw quartz, I was just astounded by what I found. But it's such a degraded state. So I agree with John, is, let's do something about it. My question was around, two very quick ones. One was around, so there's a desilting of the water that comes down the Wairungi Te Whara, and so it drops out and then that's shifted, and so you've talked about using that to help create some wetlands, or that it shallows out, we could create wetlands. And so my question is, are there other things we can do with those diggers while they're there? So, for example, when you talk about removing macrophytes, and there's a photo of the boat that pulls it out, and council's done that one time before, and I think he talks about using diggers, but you can only get as far as the arm reaches. But if you had the boat in 1 year and then kind of alternate years were trying to reach what you could from the reaches, would that be... how can we make more use of what we're already doing there, I suppose, is what my question is.
Yeah, I think there'll be little technical solutions or ideas that people can have that might be efficient to get rid of weed or put out sediment shortly. I think if you're creating wetland areas, because the wetland plants need fairly shallow water to grow. Like they need to establish in 20 centimetre water, and then they won't, even Valpo won't grow below 1.2 metre depth. So if you're establishing wetlands, you need to shallow up some of those areas, and when you've got the digger there, you'd reach out and pull out, deepen up beyond it, and pull out some of the muddier stuff, and that then becomes a planting medium for your wetland plants. So there is options if you've got a digger to move sort of out, and you're deepening up areas that you want to be deep.
Right.
And it's a sensible thing to do, because thinking of Valpo, you can expand a lot, so if you deepen up sections, then that prevents the expansion beyond that deep point.
My other thing was, with the water stratifying, is there value in trying to find ways of mixing or is it relative not good?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's a lot of mechanisms you can do that with. You'll find a lot of bubble blowers or nano bubbles or pumping oxygen in there, all super expensive because it's all using a pump. It's running 24 hours. Yeah. So the more you can find natural systems, the better. Right, thank you.
Councillor Dennis has one for Awatapu, and then we move to Sullivan.
Yes, sir. So thank you for your presentation. It's really in depth, and thank you for that. Like Councillor Tansos, it's something about large open bodies of waters plus wetlands plus wildlife that's good for the brain. And so I really believe in that. So a little bit of devil's advocate, with that southern part of that lagoon, to actually do things really well, would it pay to narrow that down and concentrate on the rest of it? Or do you think that the whole lagoon in its entirety as it is now is important for the overall life of it?
So you're saying, say, forget the southern area, put it in...
You can't say,
or you're saying...
to follow stream and just leave that alone.
Yeah. I mean, it's an option. I mean, there has been a plan to put a large wetland into the southern area, a peninsula going out, so to divert the Wairungi Te Whara into the southern part.
And I see in some of your diagrams that's by the way of channels, etc., which I thought was a really clever idea. But are we trying to bite off too much by restoring the whole thing, or the lagoon, or will it pay to concentrate on the central and north part?
That's a good point. I think it should be phased, or depending on your budget, right? But if you've got budget constraints, then phasing is a sensible way to go. And if you're going to phase, the best bang for your buck, you're working in the delta or the Wairungi Te Whara area because it's already shallow. And then I'd be working out from there.
So when I read through your report, I did get through most of it. A lot of, so you're suggesting a combination of large open bodies of water plus wetlands, aren't you? Yeah. Excellent. One more question in regard to that parrot feather and things like that. Is there being an open body of water, is the responsible regional council to come to the party with us to remove the noxious weeds, or is it because there's no water flow that there's not?
Ian would, I'm sure you've discussed it.
It's a great question, Councillor Dennis. I was exchanging notes with the Chief Executive about potential external funding opportunities as well. And the Regional Council does have, and it varies from time to time, the funding that they have. So it will be one of the things that we can pursue, but of course not guaranteed.
Floating wetlands.
I think they've, well, I don't know if they've officially identified all the water bodies in the I think Awatapu and stuff like are not officially natural water bodies because they're officially created into the full district council's name. So it's like a little bit of passing of the buck.
Really, really good report, thank you.
Okay, just to keep moving on and that, if you can move on to to Sullivan's, but if any councillors have got other questions to ask for Awatapu or any of the lagoons, that we can come back to it at the end. Thank you, Keith.
So Sullivan's Lake, it's an old oxbow wetland, much older, formed into a lake, formalised as a lake in the 1960s. The wetland was dug out and got those hard edges, much formal lake setting. Hasn't got very many inflows, just drain that comes off the escarpment, basically, a bit of stormwater, quite a few stormwater drains. But still has really high recreation value. It's highly valued by the community. A lot of birds there, perhaps too many sometimes. But yeah, it's got a lot of values. And but its water quality issues are quite severe. It's probably twice as worse as Awatapu. As in, it's probably got twice the amount of nutrients in it. The algae, the cyanobacteria blooms are twice as bad and much more frequent, almost continuous during summer. It's common to see these greens, scums, or kayaking through it. Only I tend to do that. And you've got this sort of beautiful green swirls going around you. This is not a good sign in a lake. Has these extreme fluctuations in pO and pH because of that photosynthesis respiration of the algae. Almost no aquatic plants except the water lily, Mexican water lily, which is quite, if anyone observes it, it expands quite. It's quite expensive. Although in recent years, pearl pondweed, Potamogeton crispus, has just started. I think it's only just started to appear. So that grows up in December, November, December, and it collapses again by mid-January. And so you'll see this. Either you see a little bit flecks of it. It's often interspersed with algae. A couple of years ago, it got almost lake wide for a month, and then it collapsed. And when that is growing, the water quality is great, or maybe not great, but a lot better. You can see, this far into the water instead of this far into the water, because it's sucking out all the nutrients with its growth, and it's depleting that reserve so algae can't grow, and it's not creating shading. So the macrophytes are good, and that one is great. But then, and even the water lily creates some real positive effects for that lagoon. But in excessive numbers, then we start again to see the issues with ascetics and if that organic matter keeps depositing and accumulating on that floor. Occasionally get issues with siltation, botulism, and there's a few fish migration issues because it's really very poor connection to the river. It's just the real hardcore fish that manage to get through. But there are a few eels, obviously carp, goldfish, and a few bullies and some So I think maybe the main issues again with Sullivan's, we need to think in terms of the nutrients and the plants, and also if Sullivan's is quite an easy flushing option that might just help move that algae through, because the council already puts water into the lagoon via the water treatment plant. So water's coming in via the water treatment plant, gets into the culvert, goes all the way into the most southern end of Sullivan's Lake. And increasing that flow is one of the suggestions I've made. Would help reduce the residence time in that lagoon during summer. It would help a little bit in terms of keeping the algae low, because it'll be growing away, but also it'll be being flushed out. So that's, if I go to the solution options. So, one of the other observations we observed there is that there's much lower DO, which tends to be where the water lily is. And again, I think I alluded to that probably because you've got this accumulation of organic matter from the water lily over the years, growing up, being sprayed, sinking down, decomposing, growing up, being sprayed, sinking down, decomposing. Maybe partially because people feed the ducks there, throwing in bread, a lot of ducks coming in. But for whatever reason, it's definitely it's really obvious a lower DO with higher sediment oxygen in the area. So potential options: increasing flow augmentation, dredging that western end where the water lily is, and I've suggested what I've recommended is that you maybe use a long reach digger, dredge out a section, maybe not all of it, to get the water flow, and then you potentially use mats or matting to help prevent the regrowth of that water lily, because it will expand, in a few years back into what the area dredged, to help prevent that or slow down that regrowth. It's not the cheapest option using mats, but in this case it's quite a small area and could be quite an effective option in a small, shallow lake scenario. That's the bottom lining containing the water lily. The dredging would deepen it, help that flow augmentation. The main area I think that would actually make a difference to the whole of Sullivan's Lake, like with Awatapu, is getting some more wetland area in there. So I've suggested a combined silt, forebay sediment detention area where the main drains come in at the footbridge of Sullivan's Lake. Having a forebay area which is typical for wetlands, and then have a sort of abandoned wetland system which would not only help capture sediment, which happens in the forebay, but also get the nitrogen down and potentially pull down the phosphorus a little bit, depending on how we manage the media that we put in there. Harvesting is not really an option because mostly it's devoid of bacophytes. I've only observed a lot of the squirrel pondweed on one occasion. But if that did become a big issue, it actually presents an opportunity again because you get that growth, your water quality improves, you harvest it out and avoid potential anoxic conditions. That's a good thing. But having had loggers in there quite a long time and been out there taking profile readings, I've just never seen stratification in Sullivan's. It's too shallow, it's well mixed, it doesn't have these deep holes, it doesn't have any brackish water like Awatapu that creates a stratification. Floating wetlands, always a great option, quite expensive compared to conventional wetlands, but they have a lot of potential options for bird habitat, and they're great for removing nutrients as well if they are in an area where water is flowing past them. If you're putting them where there's no water flow, they're not that effective because they remove the nutrients from where they are, but that's it. Flossus locking I think has probably got less potential in Sullivan's, but could be looked at because it's so shallow and turns over. I suspect you'll get a lot of the sediment just resuspending and then burying the phosphorus, a lot of material put on there. But it's possibly worth a crack, and possibly in localised areas like some of the inflows could be easily trialled. And then there's measures to reduce catchment inflows, which educating property owners, phosphorus stocks at the inlets have potential options. But yeah, if I was to pick one measure to do for Sullivan's Lake, it would be wetland area with properly designed with sediment 4 bays, and then working on some system to manage that extent of that extra water lily that's in the western end. The dredging option, combined dredging, removal makes sense there. But dredging of the whole lagoon gets really expensive, and you start to get kind of limited gains unless you get it really deep.
Okay, thanks, Keith. Got a question from me, Victor, and then one from Councillor Isles.
Well, a sort of similar question as applies to Owatapu. What's the source of the phosphorus? Except that in the case of Sullivan's Lake, you've got residential all the way around it. And I mean, I've seen the water draining from the residences down into the lake. So what do people do in the residence? They're all good gardeners. And they're throwing around what? Phosphorus and nitrogen.
Yeah, and they don't have a farmed land.
So they're actually potentially major cause of the actual problems of Sullivan Lake that they're so keen to protect.
That is potential, and that's a good education, easy one, right?
Yeah.
Education, let's use slow release phosphorus, nutrients if you're going to use them locally.
Have we actually measured the nutrient levels and some of the runoffs of the places just to verify that?
From the overland runoff?
Yeah, that's what's coming from the resident or from the other areas, because there's also, you're also getting runoff from the catchment up above, right?
Yeah, from the escarpment. And
the escarpment.
Yeah. And I think with what's causing phosphorus, the internal load of phosphorus in Sullivan's, because it's higher than, again, the Whakatane River water that's coming in, and it's higher than the only got occasional samples from the inflow streams. There's probably some legacy issues, because there have been historic sewer overflows when pump stations have failed 10 to 15 years ago. But there'll be a legacy in the sediment for a while. And so there's probably some issues on that.
Is there, well, I mean, if we could identify properly the sources of the phosphorus, because if that's part of the core problem, you can, attack the problem at the core. And what's the evaporation rate do you estimate from the lake? I mean, as in.
I mean, on evaporation rates, I would use. Well, the theory typically is. Made for 500, 600 mils a year.
I notice also that you're pumping water in at 50 cubes per day. You've got 1,935 cubes per day coming in. So you're pumping at what? Is there any point pumping when it's only a small fraction of the whole lot?
Yeah, it might be a bit confusing because I've estimated averages.
Yeah.
Given averages, which obviously is with the rain, but the time we kind of are critically concerned about is that summer flows, because when it rains, of course, then you do get a good flush through Sullivan's Lake. It's those long periods without rain, and that's when the benefit of pumping and getting more flushing. So it's not actually a lot of point when it's raining, and perhaps even detrimental if the rivers flood. You don't want to do any more.
Okay, thanks, Keith.
Councillor Isles.
Thank you, Chair. Hey, Keith, another great report, and thanks for that. Just looking on page 40 in the key management interventions and looking at some of those costs. basically, if we were to remove the water lily in its entirety from Sullivan Lake
Yep.
and replace it with, nice to have oxygen weeds in there, would that be the solution?
Wouldn't be a solution because there's so many things for Sullivan's Lake, right? There's so many aspects to it. You've still got, I think the water lily, for the water quality perspective, the water lily area is really only an issue because of this accumulated organic matter. It's an aesthetic issue, but it's really open to the water. It's not like the Hornwort, these big thick mats of Hornwort. There's a lot of water flow going through it and a lot of movement, so it's not. So I'm not really a big advocate of just saying let's just get rid of all the water lily. Could do, but just more of a bit more gardening of how we manage that water lily.
Supplementary, if I may. Because the next point is the bottom lining to contain the spread of water lily. That's 40k in itself. That's just to say partially mat that King Street end of the lagoon once again. I mean, even with the liner, the water lily is still going to grow, isn't it, within that line? I mean, I've got them in my ponds and they've got liners, but the water lily is still with the sediment that accumulates.
Yeah, it works for a while until the so you think it out. You'd put a line on top of the sediment, and then the but if sediment starts building up on top of the liner, then it'll start to grow.
Certainly simple fixes. Thank you.
Move on to Matatawa.
Just one quick one. I was a bit confused because it talks about harvesting macrophytes to manage plant cover and remove nutrients, but I thought you'd said that that wasn't.
I think that's in there if the little pondweed starts to become a bigger thing rather than an occasional event. So in Lake Hoawhenua, the major weed there until recently, until the last few years, was curled pondweed, and it caused quite a few issues. But in Sullivan's Lake, it doesn't seem to be such a big issue. And interestingly, it's come in here. Sullivan's Lake used to have heaps of macrophytes back in 1984. Massive cover of hornwort, just like Awatapu, really dense, and it was just sprayed out. Hit hard with the sides. But then it's kind of flipped from this macrophyte dominated system, which had its own problems, to this turbid cyanobacteria dominated system, which has different problems.
So, thank you again. So, obviously, like Sullivan's Lake is, Awatapu actually has a stream feeding it, but Sullivan's Lake doesn't. And so you're saying that apart from the water that's pumped at 40 cubic metre an hour from the water treatment station, there's no water entry into it at all?
There's a dribble of water, and during rain events, it's got this catchment.
That's what I was going to say, is that like all these, this is actually a really important stormwater collection point for the town, isn't it? So I take it that when you say that in a significant rain event, it flushes it quite well. So that'd be off the streets and everywhere and different.
Yeah, it has a fairly, most of its catchment would be.
Okay, thank you.
Move on to Matatawa Lagoon, please.
Yeah. So Te Awa o Te Atua Matatawa Lagoon, River of the Gods. I think with Matatawa, it's worthwhile understanding the history of Matatawa, which is still really affecting the present. So when I'm talking about Matatawa Lagoon or in the wildlife area, there's a western end and an eastern end. So the eastern end connects to the Te Awea River. It's full of raupo at the moment, chock-a-block. That's managed by the Department of Conservation. The western end, west of the causeway that goes to the campground, is mostly open area in front of Matatawa Township, and there's a central part of the causeway on the beach side where there's a series of flood bays, which is again now full of Raupo, between the causeway and the campground. So so Whakatane, so I'm mostly focusing here on that western part of the lagoon, which is managed by Whakatane District Council by arrangement with the Department of Conservation since about 2010. Three streams flow into it. The Awatariki stream, which has had the massive flood, sediment debris flow 2005. The Waimea Creek comes in the middle. Wainapuru stream comes into the western part of the lagoon. It has huge ecological value for birds. It's always had this massive birds, a lot of natives, a lot of rare birds, a lot of coastal birds. But I would like to just sort of briefly go back to the history, because originally the Matata Lagoon had the Tauwera River and the Rangataiki River converging. So half of the Rangataiki River half went to Whakatane, half came to the Tauwera, and the Tauwera Rangataiki converged and went out the entrance of Te Awa or Te Atua just west of Matata. So original entrance was west of Matata, going out to the dunes, taking all this water from the Tauwera and half the water from the Rangataiki. In 1914, Rangataiki Diversion Channel was put in at Thornton. Whole water level on the Rangataiki Plains dropped a metre overnight or more. Very effective drainage. In 1917, the Tauwera cut went through, probably another metre drop going on when that went through. And from that point on, the Matata Lagoon started to silt up. The entrance eventually closed, the ability to come in with boats stopped. 1950s, Tasman Pulp and Paper started up. Had a lot of dioxins in its effluent at that stage. And they started flowing, depositing in Matata Lagoon. I mention this because there's still a historic legacy that we have to deal with and affect what we're doing now. Tide gates would be eventually put in between the Tauwera River and that western part of eastern part of the lagoon, the part that's managed by DOC now. That was to hold the water level up a bit because it was starting to drain out. There was less, it was getting a bit like tidal, but also to stop some of this effluent from the concern about this dirty water from the Tauwera. That stage was called the Black Drain going in, but it affects fish passage. The ability of fish do get up there, quite tenacious, but it does affect the number on the fish. Then we had 2005 the Matata floods and this debris flow down the Awatariki. Huge devastation, filled in the lagoon. Not the first time it's happened in the 30s as well. And there was a big boom blowout in the 60s that filled in part of the lagoon. But the huge effort, and there was 5 years of working out what are we going to do about this, and eventually consent was gained in 2012. We had a restoration plan developed by BOFA's revegetation plan, and there was a revegetation of the area started. We've got the water we've got now, but it's open water beside our township, and these floodways full of Raupo on the beach side. And there's this, it was quite slow establishment. Maybe it wasn't implemented ideally, but eventually the plants established quite well by around 2019, and they were getting quite a lot of Raupo, big establishment. And then through 2021, a bunch of that vegetation on the causeway between the floodways and the main open water was cleared, and And so the Raupo was cleared. There's a little bit of a backward step for vegetation, and now we're in a regeneration phase again, but there's a lot of weeds still there, a lot of gorsts coming through, and I guess it's an opportunity to think, okay, how do we want this lagoon to be managed? It's got poor water quality, it's shallow, we can't dredge it beyond a certain depth because there's legacy dioxins in the sediment. This was all discussions and investigations from back in 2010 during this, after 2005 floods. How do we manage this lagoon? If it could be dug deeper, it would have been dug deeper then.
Excuse me, Keith, we're starting to run a bit over time.
Oh, yeah.
No, can you?
I'll get to the point. So the main, so if managing Manatā for wildlife purposes is a priority, I would recommend revisiting, pulling back up this vegetation plan that was done back in 2012. It was pretty good, and with a few little tweaks. Being kind of clear, very clear in our minds, what's open water and what we're allowed to revegetate as wetland, and then not being too afraid when the wetland is developing until it gets to a point where it's too much and infringing on your open water. And so one suggestion is helping with some pest control, supplementary planting on that northern boundary of the open water, and potentially creating another, diverting the Waimea stream through a little wetland, which, because it's a lot of silting up happening there, you could potentially divert that through a constructed wetland area, which was always intended to be Raupo wetland on the original plan. And the potential judicious use of floating wetlands could be quite helpful, because they're great for wetland habitat, and they're potentially good at removing nutrients. But the very, very top of the list is getting on with the sewage reticulation project, because the septic tanks are clearly having a bit of an issue, not just into the streams, but almost certainly also through groundwater.
Do you have any questions, Councillor Lyles?
Well, thank you. My question wasn't actually to Keith this time, it was more towards the author, Ian. Ian, back in 2005, after the Awatariki event, DOC gave a $250,000 contribution towards the restoration of those lagoons. Is there anything ongoing from DOC, or was that a one-off? Or?
I think it was just a one-off as far as I'm aware. I'm not sure of the exact detail. We actually fund, council do have a fund, budget available for actually maintaining those flood bays, and that's it.
Is it worth following up with DOC to see if there is going to be any ongoing contribution? I mean, after all, it's DOC's estate, isn't it?
Yeah, it is DOC. It is managed by DOC. We could follow it up, but I think that's probably a bit of it.
We do work with Department of Conservation, Te Papa Whai, in relation to this area, but yes, they have had some budgetary challenges as well lately.
Councillor Dennis?
Yeah, great report, thank you. Just going back for a bit of clarification, going back to 2012, when there was debate about what we do with that lagoon after it had been flooded. It was my understanding, because I was quite involved at that stage there, is that the council wanted to restore open land for the people of Manatā, because back then the lagoon went from Arawa Street right through to the camping ground, and so the idea that we have the open space water, and really your wildlife area is the eastern lagoon, and as you said rightly, from the Waimea back up to the west is meant to be left alone. The reason we cleared it out in 2021 is the Raupo started actually stretching right across the whole lagoon and started to negate the fact it was a stormwater system. But the idea was that whole area is meant to be open water in front of the township. That's really what I want to say, actually. I do know that Doc's got no money to do anything out there, as none of us have. So I don't think that people want too much to be done out there. It's just like you say, deal with the weeds and the noxious plants and all that. Good. Thank you.
Georgina?
I just wanted to point out, it is noted in the report, but it's important to mention that the long-term aspiration at the moment of Ngāti Rangatahi is to reconnect the Tarawera River to the lagoon and out to sea. And so as we see those plans progress, we will need adaptations will need to be made as noted in the report.
Thanks for that. And take your case. It was very comprehensive reading. We'll move to recommendations are on page 33 of the agenda. That the Living Together Committee received the Awatapi Lagoon, Sullivan Lake, Matasar Lagoon recommended environmental improvements report, and note that a decision regarding the funding required to carry out further maintenance and improvements to these water bodies will be made by Council as part of the long-term plan 2024-34 budget and work programs process. To have it. Councillor Tanzos, Councillor Dennis, any debate? All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. We move to public excluded, so can I have a recommendation on 209, page 209, that the public be excluded from the following parts of the proceedings of this meeting, namely the EBOP liquor and alcohol policy.
Yes.
Councillor Boynton, Mayor Victor. All those in favour?
Aye.
Carried. Can the public, only staff to remain? We do have lunch out there that's ready now, but I'd rather if we just keep on going and.
Yes.
Proceed.
Yeah.
Yep, proceed.
So, we've got to we reinstate that the Eastern Bay Plenty local alcohol policy report be received, that the Living Together Committee exclude public from considerations of this report on the grounds set out in the Local Government Official Information and Meetings Act 1987 under section 48. 2, and that the Living Together Committee confirm that the report be released to the public once the legal proceedings have been completed. Have a mover? Councillor Rangioho, Councillor Boynton. Discussion? All those in favour?
Aye.
Votes carried. Thank you very much for attending.